Hello, today we're going to be talking about prefixes. And if you're wondering what are prefixes, this lesson is for you, right? So a prefix refers to a string of letters placed at the beginning of a word to change its meaning. Okay, so have you ever looked at a word and realized and you see that the word can be broken down into smaller parts? Those letters or word parts that you see at the beginning would be prefixes. Those are what we call prefixes, okay? So they're placed at the beginning of a word. So you have a word that is complete. We call that the base word, a word that cannot be broken down into smaller components. That's our base word. So when I say a word here, beginning of a word, I mean the base word, the word that can stand on its own and cannot be broken down any further. But the prefix is a word part, a string of letters that you put before it, right? To create a new word or change the meaning of the original word. So this is one of the processes by which new words are formed, right? But let's continue. A prefix is an example of a morpheme. So a morpheme is the smallest component of a language that has grammatical function, right? And we'll see those very shortly. But remember, a morpheme is the smallest unit of a language that has grammatical function, okay? So each prefix will have its own meaning. They can be used for various functions, but the most common is negation. So every prefix will have its own meaning, right? Which means that every prefix will be used for a specific purpose, right? Some can be used to create an opposite. Some can be used to indicate something has been reversed. There are lots of prefixes. I don't even know all of them, but there are lots of prefixes. In fact, in the description for this video, there will be a PDF where you can see some common prefixes that are used in English, right? Now, I would have told you that a prefix is, a string of letters, part of a word, whatnot. But prefixes can actually be words, because we'll get to that. We'll get to these, but I'm just using this as an example. Look at the word in. In is a preposition. So in by itself has function, right? But it can also be used as a prefix to indicate something else. You see? So some words can actually function as prefixes, like under. Under is another example. Under is a preposition, but under can be placed before a word to change its meaning. So in that way, it's functioning as a prefix, but it has its own meaning on it. But it has meaning on its own, and it would be a preposition, just like in. But the majority of prefixes will be word parts, and they will not be actual words. The majority, okay? So that's just a by the way. But remember, I told you that there are many prefixes in English, and each will have its own function. But there are 4 prefixes that are the most common: in, this, and re. 97% of prefixes used are going to be these, right? These account for the majority of usage when it comes to prefixes. So the other 3% would be the rest. The 3% would be the rest of prefixes that exist. But these 4 are going to be the most commonly used. So it would be fitting to use these for this lesson, right? So in. As a prefix, in means not or without. So we place it before a word. So when we place it before a word, it is going to create either the negative or the opposite, right? So visible, invisible, visible, invisible, right? Okay? This, it has a variety of meanings: not, opposite, reverse, away, agree, disagree, right? Over here you have un, against, not, opposite, able, unable, and re means again, appear, reappear. So reappear would just mean that you appear again, right? Now, when it comes to the selection of prefixes, I'm sure you're wondering if there are rules. Not exactly. There are guidelines when it comes to the selection of prefixes, because you can't just put any prefix before any word, and right, because as you see, this, in, un, all three of these could indicate negatives. So if so you can't just pair anything with, you can't just put any of these before any word because they all indicate negative, right? There are some guidelines. Although they're not rules that are set in stone, there are some guidelines that you can follow, right? But we would say disagree. We wouldn't say unagree, right? So that's that, right? So you must understand that there are some guidelines, but we'll get to those. Able. Let's look at able. You know, you have unable. If you want, if someone is able, which means they're capable, right? They have what it takes to do something or perform a task. But we want to say they cannot do the task, we would say unable, right? But we could also use this with able, okay? If we say disabled, then we are saying that we are making something less efficient, right? So it depends on the meaning we want to convey, all right? But now we are going to proceed to some general guidelines when it comes to the selection of prefixes, okay? Okay, so we move on to the general guidelines for the selection of prefixes, right? So the prefix IM is usually used with words that start with P, B, or M. And of course, the prefix IM is going to be for negation. So examples include impossible, imbalanced, and immature. And you would realize that each of these words begins with P, B, or M, right? More examples would include impractical, immaterial, and immaterial means like something is not important, right? So those are just two other examples. So IM is generally going to be used with words that start with P, B, or M. Not the rule though, just a guideline. 2. The prefix IL is usually used with words that start with L. And of course, IL is used for negation. Illogical, illegal, illegitimate. Another example could be illegible, meaning that the writing cannot be understood, right? And 3. The prefix IR is usually used with words that start with R. Negation again. Irresponsible, irrational, irrefutable. Another example, irrelevant, right? So these are some general guidelines. But let me show you why there are guidelines and not rules. Let's look at the word reasonable. Starts with R. But if I want to make reasonable negative, do I say unreasonable? No. I say unreasonable. So un has to go before reasonable. So if I want to make the word reasonable negative, I put un before it. I don't put IR. So that is a clear example why these are guidelines, right? So these are just going to be most of the time, right? All right. So this pretty much covers everything about prefixes. I hope that this lesson was helpful. Thank you very much for watching and see you in the next one.